Bob is standing on a plain, visible from every direction. No cover, no high ground, nowhere to run. And watch what that does to him. Now put him in a valley, cliffs, forest, and one narrow pass as the only way in. Look at him go. It's the same person, different terrain, different culture. This is Bob. Bob will be tagging along with us today in our pursuit of explaining what impact the environment has on the development of cultures. By the end, you'll know exactly how a culture stacks from the ground up, and you'll have the engine to build your own. Culture does not start at the top, it starts at the bottom, with the ground, the weather, the things that keep running out, the things that keep trying to kill you, and it builds upward, layer by layer, each one shaped by the pressure below it. You don't need to know what those layers are yet. You'll see them form in real time. We're running Bob through 5 environmental pressures. Let's start with the ground under his feet, the landscape. It probably doesn't come as a surprise, but landscape has several properties. Each of these adds weight to the pressure of the landscape. All right, Bob, you're up. Bob finds a fantastic valley and decides to stay on the slopes of the mountain, together with his peeps. The slope is 40 degrees. If he needs to bring something to the other side of the valley, he has a problem. Every step costs twice what it should. He cannot move everything, he cannot move fast. So slowly, without deciding to, he stops moving at all. His community learns to produce everything it needs right here. Specialists emerge. People who know exactly how to survive at this altitude. They don't need to leave. After a few generations, they don't know how. Now let's put Bob here. The same pressure, relieved, and everything inverts. Distance becomes cheap. Trade becomes default. Now his culture spreads and comes into contact with others more easily. Movement cost is about the amount of energy someone is required to put into distance. The higher the cost, the more likely they stay isolated. Let's move on to the next one. Visibility. Bob steps onto the plain. No ridges, no tree line, no cover from any direction. From a mile away, a stranger can clock exactly where he is and how many are with him, and whether he is carrying anything worth taking. He doesn't sleep well here. He wakes up before the sun and scans the horizon before he eats. He stops trusting stillness, because on flat ground, stillness means something is watching you, deciding. So Bob does not wait to be decided about. He trains to read movement at distance. He learns to act before the threat closes the gap. His people do not build walls. There's nothing to anchor a wall to. They build reputation, speed, the credible threat of first action. But 200 miles north and Bob ends up in a forest. He can't see far, maybe 20 feet in each direction. But his neighbor cannot see him either. On a plain he develops mobility, but here he develops stationary tactics, ambushes and stuff. He uses the terrain to his advantage. Smart Bob. Visibility plays a big psychological role in the development of culture. On the open plains, Bob has to be constantly vigilant. He develops ways to overcome the constant threats, but he does develop paranoia. But when we placed Bob in an area with low visibility, he decided to change his technique. He used the lack of visibility and turned it into an advantage. Defensibility. 20 men, 1 pass. The approaching column is 200. It doesn't matter. Bob looks pretty confident. Bob doesn't need numbers. The terrain does the work. There's only one way through. He's standing in it. And the mountain behind him is a wall that took no labor to build. His culture learns to think in holding. Holding land, holding ritual, holding power structures inside them. Walls here do not need to be large. The mountain already is one. Let's put Bob somewhere else. No pass to hold, no high ground, so Bob's options are limited when it comes to defending this area. Bob makes sure he's useful to his neighbors, so they have no reason to attack him. Good on you, Bob. Most people in Bob's position would develop aggressive outward defense. Others choose to become very useful to their neighbors. So useful, there is less need of a big fat defense. Connectivity. Bob is back in the valley. A year passes and Bob hasn't seen a stranger. He's not alone. His valley is full of people, but they're all the same people. Same language, same rituals, same answer to every problem. They've had centuries to refine one way of doing things. Their knowledge is vertical. It's layered and specific. Ask him about anything beyond the ridge and he just shrugs. He doesn't need to know. Let's put Bob at a harbor market. Nothing he has is fully his. His tools borrowed, his language blend, his gods are stitched from 3 different traditions. But he can adapt to anything. The less contact a culture has with other cultures, the more particular the culture becomes. But when the culture has more contact, they will synthesize with others and blend, ever so slowly. We looked at the terrain and its pressures, but what about the weather? Some mountain valleys have very nice weather, while others have permafrost year-round. Climate not only adds to the landscape, but it amplifies it. The climate causes 3 specific subpressures that play a role in developing cultures. Predictability. Bob has never met the river god, but he trusts him completely. Every year, the water rises, and every year it recedes. Bob doesn't decide when to plant, the river decides. There's a priest whose entire job is to watch the water level, a scribe who records it, and a calendar built around it. Bob doesn't need to trust people, he trusts the systems. The systems work because the river never lies. Let's cut to second Bob. This Bob wakes up in his tent. The wind is howling and he feels it can break free any moment. When it does, Bob has a big problem. He is now in the Gobi Desert without proper shelter. He has a neighbor who's seen this before. That neighbor is the only system that works out here. A predictable climate helps a culture to plan their next moves. It helps them to become organized and gives them room for bureaucracy. But when the climate is unpredictable, you don't put your trust in it. Instead, you put your trust in your neighbors. You trust them to help you when needed, and you vow to help them too when the time comes. Survival stress. Bob in the valley ruins his harvest. His neighbor calls him an idiot. He survives anyway. Stored grain, trade routes, there is a margin for error. Bob will have to send a letter to the council informing them about the crop failure. Mistakes are allowed here. Individuality is allowed here. You can be wrong and recover. But this Bob has not been successful in hunting quite a time now. He has a huge problem. There is no margin. No food means certain death. He needs his neighbor out of a matter of life and death. And his neighbor needs him back. The hospitality rule is essential here. It is basically infrastructure. You never refuse food, you never refuse shelter. Because the next person knocking on a door in a blizzard might be you. When a blizzard hits, Bob doesn't wait for a council vote or a title. He follows whoever has the clearest plan to find the trail. Because when death is minutes away, competence is the only authority that matters. Survival stress is about the cost of failure. High survival stress creates strict social rules, but fluid decision making. Low survival stress allows for individualism, but it creates rigid institutions. Think about bureaucracy. Resource cycling. Bob in the valley builds a granary. His wealth is grain. He stays put because moving means losing his store. His walls protect what he has accumulated. Power here is measured in what you hold. Let's cut to the tropical Bob. This Bob cannot store anything. Everything rots in a week. So he stores something else. Favors. He gives conspicuously, constantly. The more he gives, the more he's owed. His bank account is people. Let's go to Bob on the steps. This Bob gets 3 months of grass after the rains. Then nothing. He cannot store the grass. He cannot stay still. His home is a tent and his wealth is his herd. His bank account is movement. The climate determines whether your essential resources are available in certain periods per year or maybe year-round. Or maybe they are available in short bursts and you follow these bursts wherever they go. This resource cycling determines in what you put your trust. Resources. We've mapped terrain, we've mapped climate. Now a different question. Not what the land looks like, but what it gives and what it withholds. The stuff you don't have enough of and the stuff you have too much of. Scarcity and abundance. Scarcity, survival. Bob is above the tree line. No timber. He needs shelter before nightfall. There's no wood to cut. No bark to strip. He looks at what he has. Bone, ice, stone, the fat of animals he has killed. He builds with those. Give a culture a gap between what they need and what they have, they fill it. Usually with ingenuity. Sometimes with wheels, sometimes with gods. And if they cannot fill it, they leave. Different valley. Same mountain range. Bob's people have arable land. Not much, but enough. The problem is 3 families control the best fields. To farm, you have to ask them. Asking becomes owing, and owing becomes tribute. The field becomes the family, and the family becomes the Lord. New environment. The river deposits soil so fertile that 2 harvests a year are routine. Every neighboring culture knows it. 3 of them want it. Bob's people stop being farmers. They become soldiers first, farmers second. Strangers are threats by default. A wall goes up. Abundance, the watch. Different resource. A vast forest. Timber, game, medicine. It provides everything. It can also be stripped bare in a generation. An elder declares certain trees sacred. Cutting them is taboo. Violating the taboo is a sin. The elder now controls the forest by managing it. Abundance, the work. Bob's people live in marble mountains. Stone is everywhere, infinite. You cannot eat it, you cannot burn it. It's useless for survival. So they build temples, argue about proportion. When survival is solved, the philosopher, the architect, the sculptor, they all emerge from the surplus. Every culture has a resource profile, what it lacks and what it overflows with. That combination shapes power before a single king is crowned. But there's one pressure we have not touched, and it doesn't shape what people do, it shapes what people believe. Natural threats. The environment offers a great variety of threats. The response of Bob and his people depends on three factors: predictability, frequency, and defensibility. Bob's village is losing livestock. Every 3 nights, without fail, something crosses the fence line. They know what it is. They know when it comes. They know where it hunts. So they build better fences. They train dogs, they post a watch rotation, and within a season, the problem is solved. Nobody builds a temple to the god of wolves. Then one morning, the ground moves. No warning, no pattern, no logic. The granary wall collapses. 3 people are dead before anyone understands what happens. They wait, 6 months pass. It happens again. A different location, different scale, same total randomness. You cannot build a fence around this. So Bob finds a priest, because he's desperate for an explanation that gives him something to do. The priest tells him it's punishment. That works. Now there's a cause. Now there's a sacrifice, prayer, moral codes. Now there's a mechanism for control, even if it's only psychological. Religion isn't ignorance. It's what people build when the threat sits outside the reach of rational action. People have a psychological need to have control over situations. When control is out of their hands, we see religion emerging. Run this across 3 variables and the shape of a culture's belief system becomes almost predictable. Alright, so we went through 4 pressures: landscape, climate, resources, and threats. We should look at these like inputs, whereas Bob's responses are outputs. It is these outputs that will form his culture. In fact, it will express itself in 6 layers of culture. Let's have a look. Layer 1, survival strategy and material culture. Every year the river floods. It drowns the banks, deposits rich black soil and recedes. In that window, Bob plants 2 harvests a year from land that should produce nothing. For Bob's survival is the art of being ready for the water. Layer 2, social organization and communication. The flood hits everyone at once. Bob cannot dig the channels alone, and the water erases his boundary markers. He must coordinate with thousands of others to manage the flow. Bob realizes that to eat, he must first organize. Layer 3, value systems. Bob learns that chaos is death. A neighbor who takes too much water or ignores the digging schedule threatens the whole harvest. Bob decides that order is sacred because the river punishes a solo actor with famine. Layer 4, worldview and temporal culture. Some years, the flood fails, and Bob starves despite doing everything right. He concludes the river is not just water, it's a decision maker. Bob begins to view time and reality as a dialogue with a divine force he must respect. Layer 5, expression and symbolic culture. The gods need a house, and honestly so does Bob the Pharaoh, his legacy. He spends his off-season hauling limestone, helping build something that will not wash away when the water rises. They align the walls to the very stars that told him when to plant in the first place. For Bob, these are not just buildings. They are a permanent thank you to the gods. Layer 6, cultural expressions. Now the Nile is in everything Bob does. He counts time by flood cycles. His word for home is the same as black soil. Bob does not think about the river anymore. He simply wakes up and watches the horizon. It is no longer a task, it is his reflex. Bob had quite a busy day, but what about your Bob? How can you find out his culture followed all these steps to land on a coherent culture? Bob has one more job to do before he can rest for the night. He lives on a steppe, flat, open, endless grass. Every few months, the grass dies. The herd needs new pasture, so Bob moves. That's the want. he wants fresh grazing land. But moving a herd of 200 animals across open terrain takes days. And while he's moving, he's exposed, visible from miles away. No walls, no cover. Anyone can see exactly where he is and what he's carrying. That is the obstacle, vulnerability during movement. So Bob develops a scouting system. Riders sent ahead, routes checked before the herd commits, a signal language, flags, smoke, whistles, that communicates threat and safety across distance without slowing the migration. That is the action. The consequence? The riders become the most valued members of the group. Speed and awareness are now the highest skills. A culture of horsemanship, signal literacy, and controlled movement develop around one recurring problem. That is the consequence. One obstacle, action, consequence. One cycle, one cultural trait cost. Of course, you will want to run this way deeper. If you aren't completely familiar with this, check out this video after this one. Now you run it backwards. You arrive in a culture you've never seen. They have an elaborate gift-giving ritual. Every time two groups meet, goods are exchanged before any conversation happens. Refusing the gift is the gravest possible insult. Strange, specific, and it feels a little arbitrary. So you pull the thread. Why is gift-giving mandatory? Because trust has to be established instantly between strangers. Why between strangers? Because this culture moves constantly and encounters unfamiliar groups regularly. Why do they move constantly? Well, because their resource base is unpredictable. Boom and bust. They follow the abundance. But why does that create a gift ritual specifically? Because in a mobile culture, you cannot store objects. The only bank account is goodwill. The gift isn't generosity, it is infrastructure in that culture. You just found the pressure underneath the ritual. This is what I call reverse engineering culture. I started with a cultural trait that seemed somewhat random and traced it all the way back to the environment. If you want to know more, check this video after this one. So you just ran the cycle twice. Once forward and you ran a cycle backwards. That's the whole engine. Every culture you will ever build has a Bob in it somewhere. A person who needed something on the other side of something, who solved one problem and created 3 more. Find that person, develop a great culture, and the rest of the world will build itself. Thanks, Bob.